Hi, this is Gary Auden, and with me today we have someone from Tadaran Telecom, and we're going to talk about high availability for unified communications. The person joining me today is Trish Harris, who is the Channel Sales Director at Tadaran Telecom. And I know Trish going way back years, and we just reintroduced ourselves through this Educast. Now, let's talk about what we're going to talk about, because it's important that you understand what you're going to learn with this Educast. Why do you want this business continuity? What does the term high availability mean? And that's going to be a major point we're going to cover here. Let's create some business continuity solutions. Let's talk about configurations for high availability, how the cloud may actually participate in this configuration and implementation, and then finally, how do you select a solution? So let's start off, Trish, with this first question. Why is business continuity so important to unified communications?
Hi, Gary. Thank you for letting me join you this morning. Your question, why UC business continuity? Well, if your UC system fails, that failure can have a lot of repercussions. And a good example would be in a contact center where every call is traditionally measured in seconds and a value put on that call. So if you were to have your UC system fail, that could have extreme ramifications for your company. It also idles your workers, which is a very expensive resource, and it stops that communication with your customers. All that just kind of brings in a poor reputation and lack of confidence in your clients, and they may never come back. The high availability, which is the famous 5 nines, is our goal with UC.
But let's talk more about what high availability is. It's a number, it's a metric, but what does it actually mean?
What it refers to is systems that can operate for long periods of time with no downtime, no interruption to the system at all. Its availability is a metric that is compared to 100% operational uptime. Now, our legacy TDM PBXs were famous for having the reputation of having that high availability of the 5 nines, which means that they've experienced 5 minutes or less of downtime in 1 year of continuous operation. That is what we're striving for in our new IP-based UC systems. Availability, it's the metric here. One of the things that I just want to bring up is that term MTBF is mean time between failure, but engineers like to use the term mean time between repair. And so if you look at the two and times it by 100, that's what you come up with your 5 nines. But I think it's very important to tell our listeners that mean time between repair really should be mean time between restore, because that is the goal of high ability, is not to repair, but to restore, or to have it never go down and have no interruptions to begin with.
Now, one of the points I think is important to the audience is there are many different ways of creating backup for a system, and you have half a dozen here to talk about.
Right. We have the old traditional cold standby is still out there. There's active-passive, active-active, which is the high availability. And of course, we're going to spend some extra time on that. Your solutions can be on-prem. They can be cloud-based, and they can also be a hybrid, a combination of both on-prem and cloud.
So let's start off with the easy one, the cold standby, which I think a lot of people understand, but have not thought about that much.
It's still around. This goes back the full 30 years of my telecom experience, and we still see it out there. Cold standby really consists of 2 UC servers, one which is referred to as hot and the other is cold. This normally does not support the 5 nines. Now, in a cold standby, the active UC server provides all the services in the normal mode, and it is the hot server. Now, the cold one is identical, but it's just sitting over there in the corner or in a closet, gathering dust and cobwebs offline, And in the case of a hardware failure on the hot server, then someone physically has to get up, go over there and physically connect and bring up that cold server, and hopefully it's going to be operational, and then switch all services from the hot server to the cold server. Now, definitely during the switchover, there is a loss of service, and that can, if you have really good people, it could be, maybe 10, 15, 30, 40 minutes. It could be all day or multiple days.
But Trish,
yes?
Trish, one of the things I'm thinking about is there's mostly cons to this and not pros. Yes. And you've mentioned a lot more cons than you've mentioned.
Absolutely. In fact, as you see, I put a little head scratcher there under the pros, because I'm not too sure there is any, other than the fact you do have a plan of some sort. But there is mostly negatives to this. It's not automated, and which is really something in today's world you should not go without. The database is normally not current. You've made a lot of changes. The cold system has no idea. It could be a year, 2, 3 years old database. It's labor intensive. And if you have a UC solution that requires multiple servers for different applications, you may only be bringing back basic voice, but not your contact center or your voicemail. And because this is idle hardware, it's just sitting there doing nothing, and you have to license it. It is very expensive.
One of the points I think you haven't mentioned, which is important about this slide, is the backup is not synchronized in any way with the primary.
Absolutely, not at all.
So let's go on to, might call it a better solution, the active-passive design.
Yes, and this is the one that I see the most often. In the active-passive model, there's at least 2 servers, and now we are getting into a new term called a cluster, okay? So in active-passive cluster, the primary server is active. It hosts the UC applications, and it is running the one that is running all the production, right? Now, during normal operation, the secondary server does not host those applications. It's sitting there running the operating system. It is up, it is running, and it's standing there ready to take the load should the primary server have a failure or you need to take it offline for maintenance. Now, because it is not synced on a normal basis, it's not running our active-active, there is a loss of service during the switchover, normally less than a cold standby, but there's definitely a loss of service. And this application can be both on-premise or it can be cloud-based.
Let's move forward and talk more about that comparison. You have a little pro here now, but you still have cons.
Okay, this is a big pro. It's normally automated. It can sense the secondary server can sense that the primary has gone offline. It will automatically, switch over and start providing applications. So that is a big pro. The other example with our cold standby, in a multi-server UC environment where you have multiple servers for other applications, it may not provide all those services unless you have all of your applications working in an active-passive format. And it's also expensive because even though it's up and running, it's still idle. It's not running your normal business on a day-to-day basis. It also has duplicate licenses. And if you're using a cloud-based service to provide your backup, then there's monthly fees for that.
So let's get to your ultimate solution, what you call the active-active solution.
I call it the ultimate because it gives you all of the advantages of a single system that never fails. In an active-active situation, you, like the others, have a multiple server environment. And these servers, though, share the load. Both of them are running full-time. So you can normally get a lot of load balancing in an active-active environment. The maintenance and the upgrade downtimes have little impact because they are sharing their database and replicating that database on a real-time basis. So if one of the servers in the cluster were to go down, There's no service interruption. The other database is up, it is ringing, it can take full control over the system, continue to operate. So there's little or no impact on normal operations. And this, one of the things that's so nice is it can be on-premise, it can be cloud, and it can be a hybrid deployment.
Could you show us a little more of that configuration with and cons now?
Absolutely. If you can see this picture here, I have shown two different servers. I've got real-time replication between the two. So if I'm on a call on one server, or I'm in do not disturb or call forward or whatever, the other servers are aware of it. They are initially logged into, or I shouldn't say even logged into, they are working off a dedicated server to them. This is their primary server. The other server is their secondary server. Okay, so I'm able to do load balancing this way. The database is always current. Huge pro. It's definitely more reliable, because if, unlike or cold standby or your active passive, where you really have not used that secondary server in hopefully a long time, and you don't know if it's really going to work, you're always aware of any issues in all your components in the active, because they're working all the time. So you're always getting the alarms, you have current information, even on their maintenance status. They're much easier to geographically disperse, Gary, and we all know when you're talking about high availability that we really need to take in geographical and environmental issues in addition to the hardware components.
One thing you didn't mention, which I think a lot of people sort of dismiss here or don't even think about, is because you have two active servers, you can deal with peak traffic, let's say seasonal traffic variations, much better than you can in the active passive or just the active cold standby. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. You're able to hit those peaks and the lulls because you have much more resources available on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis without having to try to initialize something in a scramble format just to handle those peaks.
Okay, let's move on to an example here of the active.
So here is the example that I'm most commonly asked about, and that is I have two servers, I have two locations, and I have a server go down. What happens to the phones that are normally registered to that server? In the active example, those phones, when it doesn't sense its primary server, will automatically re-register to a pre-programmed backup or failover server, which in this case could be server number 2. And so therefore it's running like a single system now. This example, Gary, is example number 2. And this is one that very few people really talk about or ask. And that is that my servers are still up and running. All my components in my UC are just running fine. But my network goes down. And in a high availability active environment, those systems, those locations then are able to operate independently of each other without the network. And so this is something that needs to be considered in high availability because that is an integral component of the applications.
Now you have a product line called AIONIX, and how does that solution satisfy those requirements?
Thank you for asking, Gary. And before I really get into the active high availability, I just want to briefly explain the architecture because that really fits into high availability and what we've done. Our AIONIX is a pure native SIP UC solution. And as such, it's given us a lot of flexibility in this environment. One of the things is that we can utilize any industry standard enterprise servers. If you buy them from us, it's going to be a Dell, but we do have customers using HP and Cisco. But more importantly, in today's environment, we're finding that more and more customers are going to virtual machines. So we're able to deploy AIONIX in VMware, Hyper-V, which is Microsoft's virtualization platform, KVM, which is, of course, Linux, and even more importantly, and the Amazon Web Services, because we're able to have the Amazon's machine image, what they call the AMI.
Would you move forward then and talk about the server situation a little more, please?
Yes, this is also very important in high availability. A single server on the AIONIX can support more than one application. So it can support the AIONIX software itself, CMail, which is our voicemail and auto attendant application, our dispatch console, and even more importantly, the AIONIX contact center. So in the high availability mode, I can support all of these applications and not just one. This is something that is very important and fairly unique.
So let's talk through a AIONIX high availability scenario.
All righty. In this scenario, Gary, I have two locations, one in New York, one in Los Angeles. Now, one of the things in the AIONIX, where this is a two-server cluster, I can have up to 8 servers in an AIONIX cluster. And that can be done for high availability. It could be done for actually scale, because I can support over 3,000 users per server. So with multiple servers, I can actually grow quite big. And I can also use any combination of on-prem, public, or private cloud in a single deployment. In fact, Gary, I can take that system in Los Angeles, that server, and move those licenses to Amazon Web Services. We really don't care. We don't care what combination. In fact, I think we have like 6 or 7 different in our own production cluster at Tataran. So in New York, my people are going to, their phones are going to be registered to the AIONIX server there, right? In Los Angeles, they're going to be registered to Amazon Web Services. I have my active replication going between the two. If I were to take the AIONIX server in New York down, all my phones, just like the other example I did on active, all the phones in New York are going to go out and re-register to Amazon Web Services. But one of the things with the AIONIX that is also unique is that if you're using our AIONIX SIP phones, those existing calls won't even be dropped. So the phones not only will re-register to the other server, but it will retain the calls. So this is really important, especially going back to that contact center where you will need to retain that call.
Now, is it correct that any server could be anywhere in the world with this configuration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any server can be anywhere in the world, and you can move them around. So if, say, I want to take it out of that Amazon Web Services, take it out of AWS, move it over to Azure because they're making making me a better deal on a monthly basis. Those licenses within moments can be transferred to Azure and operating in a normal manner. You can bring it back in-house, put them in a physical server, move them back out. We don't care where they are in the world, and we don't care what method you're using. And we do this all, Gary, without duplication of the user licenses.
So economically, it's much more attractive.
Oh, absolutely, because if I have worldwide, maybe I have, well, even in this scenario, I have 2 servers, maybe I have 2,000 users, 1,500 in New York and 500 in Los Angeles. I only need the number of services that my complete cluster is using. They're concurrent, so we don't care where they're located.
Let's move on to the point that's so important here is how do I select this kind of solution? Well, what influences me?
Budget, definitely. So you have to look at your budget, what you're able to spend on it. You need to look at your staff resources. If you don't have a lot of staff resources, you're definitely not going to be able to accommodate anything that takes someone physically having to make those changes. So automatic becomes very important. You look at what already exists. Do you have hardware that's there? What do you have as far as servers, backup, your network? That's also a resource. What are your strategic IT plans? And that really needs to go into business, also into the business plans, because is it important to the business to never have a customer not be able to reach you by the phone? So that is strategic. And of course, your security concerns, which everyone has to be concerned with. And then the overall risk assessment.
Well, you're from a company called Tataran, and a lot of people don't know how big a group you are. And Tataran's been around for an awfully long time, and I've dealt with them over the years. And if you notice, 20 million IPPX ports on 120,000 businesses. So this is not a new idea for Tataran. It's something they've been working on and evolving over the years. But I'd like to point out to those who are viewing, there are 3 resources that are worth discussing. One is their solution, secondly, a case study, and thirdly, a podcast that I recorded with Tataran a little while ago. You always need contact information, and this is the place to go, the marketing department at Tataran. And I thank you very much, Trish, and I thank the viewers for listening.
Thank you, Gary.